What would you do if you discovered your husband had taken out a $500,000 loan in your name without your knowledge? Today on Her True Stories, we're sharing Ruth Wheeler's incredible journey from betrayal to triumph. This 66-year-old woman's strategic revenge against her gambling, cheating husband will leave you speechless. Make sure you're subscribed to Her True Stories and hit that notification bell, because this story proves that underestimating a woman can be the biggest mistake of your life. The papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a nervous-looking courier who couldn't meet my eyes. I signed for them with steady hands, though my heart was already racing. Even before I opened the manila envelope, I knew my comfortable world was about to shatter. I'm Ruth Wheeler, 66 years old, and until that moment, I thought I understood my life. For 38 years, I'd been married to Marcus Wheeler, a charming man with big dreams and an even bigger appetite for risk. We lived in a beautiful colonial home in Westchester County, New York, complete with manicured gardens and a view of the Hudson River that had once made me feel like the luckiest woman alive. Marcus ran Wheeler and Associates, a commercial real estate development company that had seen its share of ups and downs over the decades. As his wife, I'd learned to weather the storms, the late nights, the stressed phone calls, the feast or famine cycles that seemed to define our industry. I'd supported him through every venture, every setback, every triumphant comeback. What I hadn't known was that he'd been using my name, my credit, and my financial reputation as collateral for his increasingly desperate business deals. The documents in that envelope were from First National Bank, informing me that I was personally liable for a $500,000 business loan that was now in default. My signature was there, clear as day, on loan documents I'd never seen before in my life. I sank into my kitchen chair, the papers scattered across our granite countertop like the fragments of my shattered trust. The handwriting was mine, or rather, a perfect forgery of mine. Marcus had been practicing my signature for months, maybe years, perfecting it until even I had to look twice to tell the difference. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone to call him, but then I stopped. Something cold and calculating settled in my chest, a feeling I'd never experienced before. Instead of calling, I gathered the papers, placed them carefully back in the envelope, and walked to my home office. If Marcus thought he could destroy me financially and walk away unscathed, he was about to learn just how wrong he could be. That evening, Marcus came home with his usual flourish, expensive wine, takeout from our favorite Italian restaurant, and that charming smile that had won my heart nearly 4 decades ago. "How was your day, beautiful?" he asked, kissing my cheek as if nothing had changed. I served dinner in our dining room, using the good china we'd received as wedding gifts. The irony wasn't lost on me, celebrating with tokens of our marriage, while he systematically destroyed it from within. "Marcus," I said carefully, cutting my chicken piccata into precise pieces, "I received some interesting documents today." He froze for just a moment, his fork halfway to his mouth. "Oh, what kind of documents?" I could see him calculating, trying to determine how much I knew. His eyes darted to my face, searching for clues about my emotional state. "From First National Bank. About a loan. A rather substantial loan, actually." The color drained from his face, but he quickly recovered, setting down his fork and reaching for his wine glass. "Ruth, I can explain." "Can you?" I interrupted softly. "Can you explain how my signature appeared on loan documents I never saw? Can you explain how you put our home, our entire financial future, at risk without even consulting me?" He stood up abruptly, beginning to pace around the dining room like a caged animal. "The business was in trouble, Ruth. Real trouble. If I didn't get that loan, we would have lost everything anyway. I was protecting us. By forging my signature? By doing what needed to be done." His voice rose, and I saw a flash of the real Marcus, the desperate, selfish man hiding behind the charming exterior. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The competition, the market conditions, the gambling debts. He stopped pacing. What? I pulled out my phone and showed him the screen. Bank statements, credit card bills, casino transaction records. Did you think I wouldn't find out about Atlantic City? About the private poker games? About the $200,000 you've lost in the past 6 months alone? Marcus slumped back into his chair, the fight going out of him. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. How long have you known? He asked quietly. About the gambling? 3 months. About the forged signatures and fraudulent loans? Since this morning. He looked up at me with something that might have been hope. Ruth, we can fix this. We can work together, like we always have. The casino debt, I can pay that off with the development profits from the Riverside project. The loan, we'll refigure the terms, bring in some partners.
No.
The single word hung in the air between us like a blade. No, he repeated, as if he hadn't heard correctly. No, Marcus. We can't fix this. You destroyed that possibility the moment you decided my financial security was worth less than your gambling addiction. I stood up from the table, leaving my half-eaten dinner behind. I'll be sleeping in the guest room tonight. Tomorrow, I'm calling my attorney. As I walked toward the stairs, I heard him call after me, his voice taking on that wheedling tone he used when he was desperate. Ruth, you can't be serious. After 38 years of marriage, you're going to throw it all away over money? I paused at the bottom of the staircase and turned back to look at him. This man I'd loved, trusted, and supported for most of my adult life. I'm not throwing anything away, Marcus. You already did that for both of us. The next 3 months passed in a blur of legal meetings, document reviews, and the slow, methodical dismantling of our shared life. Marcus hired the most expensive divorce attorney in the county, apparently confident that he could outmaneuver me in court. What he didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this battle far longer than he realized. My attorney, Janet Thornton, was a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in high-asset divorces involving financial fraud. She'd come highly recommended by my friend Catherine, whose own divorce from her embezzling ex-husband had made local headlines 5 years earlier. The challenge, Janet explained during one of our early meetings, is that your husband has been systematically moving assets out of reach. The business accounts have been drained, transferred to offshore holdings we can't easily access. The properties are buried under layers of LLC ownership. Even your joint investment accounts have been liquidated. I nodded calmly, taking notes in the leather portfolio I'd bought specifically for these meetings. What about the loan? The $500,000 debt in my name? Legally, you're responsible for it since your signature is on the documents. Proving forgery is possible but difficult, especially since the signatures are so well executed. Even if we can prove fraud, the bank will still expect payment. Marcus had been thorough. I had to give him that. In the months before I discovered his deception, he'd been quietly liquidating everything we'd built together. Our retirement accounts, emptied.
Our stock portfolio, sold.
Even my grandmother's jewelry had disappeared from our safe deposit box. When I confronted him about the missing jewelry during one particularly contentious mediation session, he just shrugged. Desperate times, Ruth. I had to raise capital somehow. Besides, it's not like you ever wore those old pieces anymore. That casual dismissal of my family heirlooms, pieces that had been passed down through 3 generations, crystallized something inside me. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about respect, about value, about the fundamental recognition that I was a human being with rights and dignity. By the time we reached the final divorce hearing, Marcus had successfully painted me as a naive housewife who'd never worked outside the home and had no understanding of business or finance. His attorney argued that I should be grateful for any settlement at all, given the company's dire financial straits. Your Honor, his lawyer argued with theatrical sincerity, Mrs. Wheeler has lived a comfortable life for decades, supported entirely by my client's business acumen. While we sympathize with her current situation, the unfortunate reality is that the business assets simply aren't there to provide the kind of settlement she's demanding. I sat quietly at the plaintiff's table, my hands folded, my expression calm. Janet had advised me to let Marcus and his attorney do the talking. Let them hang themselves with their own rope, she'd said. And hang themselves they did. The final divorce hearing took place on a gray November morning that perfectly matched my mood. I dressed carefully, a navy blue suit that conveyed professionalism without ostentation, pearl earrings that had been my mother's, and my wedding ring, which I planned to remove for the final time when the judge signed our decree. Marcus arrived with his usual entourage, his attorney, his business partner, and his new girlfriend, a blonde woman barely half his age who worked as a marketing consultant for his company. The girlfriend, Brittany or Bethany, I could never remember, sat in the gallery wearing a designer dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. I'd chosen to attend alone except for Janet. Something about facing this ending with quiet dignity felt important to me. The hearing itself was largely procedural. Asset division, spousal support, debt allocation, all the dry, legal language that reduces a lifetime of shared experiences to bullet points on a court document. When Judge Harrison asked about the $500,000 loan, Marcus's attorney was ready with his response. Your Honor, while Mrs. Wheeler claims the signatures were forged, our handwriting expert has concluded they're authentic. Furthermore, Mrs. Wheeler was aware of her husband's business dealings and had previously signed similar documents. This appears to be an attempt to avoid responsibility for debt incurred during the marriage. I felt Janet tense beside me, but I kept my expression neutral. We'd expected this argument. Additionally, the attorney continued, our forensic accountant has determined that the Wheeler family's total assets, including the family home, the business interests, and all liquid investments, amount to approximately $50,000 after outstanding debts are resolved. Given Mrs. Wheeler's limited earning capacity and the substantial debt burden, my client is generously offering to assume all business debts in exchange for retaining primary ownership of Wheeler and Associates. It was a masterful performance, designed to make me look like a gold digger trying to escape responsibility for debts I'd supposedly helped incur. When Judge Harrison asked if I had anything to add, I stood slowly and spoke clearly. Your Honor, I accept the proposed settlement as outlined by opposing counsel. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Janet shot me a startled look, but I'd already made my decision. This wasn't the battlefield I'd chosen for my war. Very well, Judge Harrison said, clearly surprised by the lack of drama. The decree of divorce is granted, with asset and debt division as agreed upon by both parties. As we gathered our documents, Marcus approached me with a smirk that I'd grown to despise over the past few months. I have to admit, Ruth, I'm surprised. I thought you'd put up more of a fight. I looked at him calmly. This man who'd shared my bed for nearly 4 decades and had apparently learned nothing about who I really was. Sometimes the smartest strategy is knowing when not to fight, I replied. His grin widened. Well, I appreciate you being reasonable about this. Look, once everything settles down, maybe we can. Marcus, I interrupted gently, let me ask you something. In all the years you've known me, have you ever seen me make a truly stupid decision? His smile faltered slightly. What do you mean? I mean exactly what I said. You've known me for 38 years. Have you ever seen me do something genuinely foolish when it came to matters of importance? He was quiet for a moment, thinking. No, I suppose not. Then why would you assume I'm starting now? Before he could respond, I walked away, leaving him standing in the courthouse hallway with that puzzled expression on his face. But as I pushed through the courthouse doors, I heard his laughter echoing behind me, loud, cruel, and triumphant. Face it, Ruth, he called out, his voice carrying across the marble lobby. You don't have a dime to your name. 38 years of marriage, and you're walking away with nothing. I didn't turn around. I didn't respond. I simply walked to my car, got in, and drove home to the small apartment I'd been renting since the separation began. I said nothing because I didn't need to. Marcus had just made the biggest mistake of his life, and he didn't even know it yet. The apartment I'd rented was a modest two-bedroom unit in a quiet complex about 20 minutes from our old house. Nothing luxurious, but clean and comfortable, with large windows that let in plenty of natural light. I'd furnished it simply. Pieces from IKEA, some artwork from local artists, plants that I tended carefully each morning. For the outside world, it looked like the temporary housing of a newly divorced woman starting over with limited means, which was exactly the impression I wanted to create. In reality, that apartment was my command center. The second bedroom had been converted into an office where I spent my days managing what Marcus didn't know existed, the real Wheeler fortune. While he'd been busy embezzling from joint accounts and business holdings, I'd been quietly building a separate financial empire that existed entirely outside his knowledge or reach. It had started 15 years earlier when my father passed away and left me a substantial inheritance. Instead of adding it to our joint accounts as Marcus had suggested, I consulted with a financial advisor who specialized in asset protection for high-net-worth individuals. Mrs. Wheeler, she'd explained, there are legal ways to maintain financial independence within a marriage. Given your husband's business ventures and appetite for risk, it might be wise to create some insulation. I'd taken her advice to heart. Over the years, I'd funneled my inheritance and the profits from some shrewd personal investments into a complex web of trusts, offshore accounts, and holdings companies. Every transaction was completely legal, properly documented, and carefully structured to remain separate from the marital assets that Marcus knew about. By the time our divorce was finalized, I controlled approximately $3.2 million in assets that were entirely mine. Investments in blue-chip stocks, municipal bonds, real estate investment trusts, and even a small stake in a tech startup that had recently gone public. But Marcus knew none of this. To him, I was the financially naive housewife who'd never worked outside the home and had no head for business. In the days following our divorce hearing, I maintained my routine. I grocery shopped with coupons, bought generic brands, drove my 10-year-old Honda Civic, and generally lived like someone watching every penny. Meanwhile, I monitored Marcus's situation with the careful attention of a predator watching wounded prey. Wheeler and Associates was bleeding money. The Riverside development project he'd been so confident about had hit regulatory snags. 3 of his major investors had pulled out after learning about the company's debt situation. His business partner, the same one who'd sat smugly in the courtroom, was already putting out feelers about dissolving their partnership. Most importantly, the $500,000 loan he'd taken out in my name was coming due, and he didn't have the cash to pay it. I gave him exactly 1 week to realize the scope of his mistake. The call came on a Wednesday evening, exactly 7 days after our divorce was finalized. I was sitting in my small living room, reading a mystery novel and sipping herbal tea, when my phone rang. Marcus's name appeared on the screen. I let it ring 4 times before answering. "Hello, Marcus." "Ruth." His voice was strained, lacking the confidence and charm that had once defined him. "We need to talk." "Do we?" "I thought our business was concluded." "Ruth, please. I'm in trouble. Real trouble." I marked my place in the book and set it aside. "What kind of trouble?" "The loan. The $500,000 loan. It's being called in, and I don't have the money. The bank is threatening foreclosure on everything. The business, the house, everything."
I see.
"And how does this concern me? As I recall, you were quite clear in court that the business debts were your responsibility now. But it's your signature on the loan documents, your credit that guaranteed it. If I default, They'll come after you next. I was quiet for a long moment, letting him stew in his own panic. Marcus, I said finally, you've spent the last 6 months telling everyone who would listen that I'm financially naive and have no understanding of business matters. You convinced a judge that I'm essentially helpless without your support. Why would you think I'd have any solution to a problem that apparently has you stumped? Because. He paused, and I could practically hear the wheels turning in his head. Because you're smarter than I gave you credit for.
Am I?
Ruth, I know I made mistakes. I know I hurt you. But we were married for 38 years.
That has to count for something.
I'm asking. No, I'm begging you. Please help me figure this out. The desperation in his voice was almost pitiable. Almost. What exactly are you asking me to do? I don't know. Use some of your inheritance money, maybe? Or help me negotiate with the bank. You always were good with people, good at finding solutions when things looked impossible. Marcus, what inheritance money? You cleaned out all our joint accounts, remember? According to your own attorney, I walked away from our marriage with essentially nothing. But surely you have something saved up. Some emergency fund, or… Even if I did, I interrupted. Why would I use it to bail out the man who forged my signature, stole my family jewelry, and publicly humiliated me in court? The line was quiet for so long I thought he might have hung up. Because, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper, if I go down for this, I'm taking you with me. That loan is in your name, Ruth. Your credit, your collateral. If I can't pay it, they'll come after you for every penny. And there it was, the threat I'd been waiting for. The final revelation of who Marcus Wheeler really was beneath the charm and the promises. I see, I said calmly. So let me make sure I understand. You're asking me to help you, because if I don't, you'll let me be destroyed by the debt you created in my name without my knowledge or consent. Ruth, Thank you for clarifying that, Marcus. It's helpful to know exactly where we stand. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I said, standing up and walking to the window of my small apartment, that you have 24 hours to figure out your situation. After that, I'm going to stop being quite so accommodating. Ruth, wait. I hung up the phone and immediately called Janet Thornton. Janet, it's Ruth Wheeler. Are you available to meet tomorrow morning? I think it's time we discussed phase 2 of our strategy. The next morning, I dressed more carefully than I had in months. Instead of my usual jeans and sweater, I chose a tailored black dress, professional heels, and the pearls my grandmother had given me, the ones Marcus thought he'd pawned. Janet met me at the downtown offices of Thornton and Associates, her expression curious. She'd been patient with my unorthodox approach to the divorce proceedings, trusting that I had a larger strategy, even when she didn't understand it. Ruth, she said, settling into her chair with a cup of coffee, you sounded different on the phone last night. More decisive. I am. It's time to show her hand. I opened my briefcase and pulled out a thick folder I'd been preparing for months. Janet, remember when you said proving the forged signatures would be difficult, but not impossible? Yes, but the cost of forensic analysis and expert witnesses would be substantial, and even then. What if I told you I had video evidence of Marcus practicing my signature? Janet's coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips. Excuse me? I slid a tablet across the desk and pressed play. On the screen, Marcus appeared, sitting at his desk in our home office, methodically copying my signature from various documents. The timestamp showed it was from 3 months before the loan documents were signed. How did you? I installed security cameras in the house after some valuable items started disappearing, I explained. Initially, I thought we might have had a break-in. Instead, I discovered my husband was stealing from me and practicing financial fraud. Janet stared at the screen as Marcus continued his forgery practice, completely unaware he was being recorded. This is, she began. Enough to prove fraud, yes. But there's more. I opened another folder and spread out financial documents, bank statements, and transaction records. For the past 15 years, I've been maintaining completely separate finances that Marcus knew nothing about. The inheritance from my father, some smart investments, and the profits from a small business I've been running online. All completely legal, all properly documented, all mine. Janet picked up one of the statements, her eyes widening as she saw the numbers. Ruth, this shows assets of over $3 million. $3.2 million, to be precise. But in court, you said. I said nothing. I let Marcus and his attorney make assumptions, and I didn't correct them. There's no legal requirement to disclose assets that were never marital property to begin with. Janet leaned back in her chair, a slow smile spreading across her face. You've been playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. Something like that. I gathered the documents back into their folder. Now, here's what I need you to do. Over the next hour, I outlined my plan. It was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its execution. First, we would file fraud charges against Marcus based on the video evidence of forgery. The criminal charges would be serious enough to warrant freezing his assets pending investigation. Second, we would use the evidence of his systematic theft of marital property, including my grandmother's jewelry, to file for recovery of stolen assets. Third, and most importantly, we would offer to purchase the defaulted loan from First National Bank at a discount, effectively making me Marcus's creditor. The beauty of this approach, I explained, is that it gives us control over the timeline and terms of resolution. Instead of letting the bank foreclose and destroy everything, we can manage the process. Janet was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. Ruth, this will ruin him completely. His business, his reputation, potentially his freedom if the fraud charges stick. Yes, I agreed calmly.
It will.
And you're okay with that? I thought about the question seriously. Was I okay with destroying the man I'd once loved? Was I okay with using my intelligence and resources to systematically dismantle his life the way he'd tried to dismantle mine? Janet, for 38 years, I supported Marcus through every venture, every setback, every dream. I trusted him with my financial security, my emotional well-being, and my future. In return, he stole from me, lied to me, and tried to leave me holding the bag for his debts while he started a new life with a woman half his age. I paused, looking out the window at the city bustling below. But more than that, yesterday, he threatened me. He told me that if I didn't help him, he'd let me be destroyed by the debt he created in my name. That's not the behavior of someone who made mistakes. That's the behavior of someone who sees me as nothing more than a resource to be exploited. I looked back at Janet, my voice steady and clear. So, yes, I'm okay with it. Sometimes the most merciful thing you can do for someone is to let them experience the full consequences of their choices. Janet nodded slowly. All right then, let's begin. The first domino fell on Friday morning when federal agents arrived at Wheeler and Associates with a search warrant. I wasn't there to see it, but Marcus's secretary, who'd always been fond of me, called to give me a play-by-play. Mrs. Wheeler, you should have seen his face when they walked in with those boxes, she whispered into the phone. Agent Rodriguez announced they were investigating bank fraud, and Mr. Wheeler just went white as a sheet. How is he handling it? Not well. He's been on the phone with his lawyer for 2 hours. Oh, and that girlfriend of his? She disappeared the minute the FBI showed up, packed up her desk, and left without a word. I made appropriate sympathetic noises, but internally I was satisfied. Nothing exposed fair-weather relationships quite like federal criminal charges. The second domino fell Monday morning when the bank received our offer to purchase Marcus's defaulted loan. Janet had been brilliant in her negotiation. We'd offered to buy the debt for 60 cents on the dollar, saving the bank the cost and hassle of foreclosure, while giving us complete control over the asset recovery process. By Tuesday, I legally owned the $500,000 debt that Marcus owed, along with all the collateral securing it, which meant I now owned his business. Marcus called me Wednesday evening, his voice hollow with shock and disbelief. "Ruth, what have you done?" "I've protected my interests, Marcus. Just like you taught me to do." "Protected your interests? You destroyed me. The FBI, the fraud charges, buying my debt. This is revenge, pure and simple." "Is it?" I asked mildly. "Or is it just good business? You always said I didn't understand finance. I thought I'd try to learn." "This isn't you, Ruth. This cold, calculating behavior, it's not who you are." I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "You're right, Marcus. This isn't who I was. But it's exactly who I needed to become to survive what you did to me." "Ruth, please. We can work something out. I'll sell everything, pay you back every penny." "With what?" "According to your own testimony in court, you don't have any significant assets. Remember? You spent months convincing everyone that you were barely solvent." The silence stretched between us. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "I want what you owe me. The $500,000 you borrowed in my name, plus interest, plus penalties for late payment. I also want the return of my grandmother's jewelry and compensation for the other personal property you stole from our marriage." "Ruth, you know I don't have that kind of money." "Then I guess you'll need to be creative. You have 30 days to present me with a payment plan, or I begin foreclosure proceedings on all collateral securing the debt." "Which includes the business?" "Yes." "And the house?" "Yes." "Ruth, you'll destroy everything we built together." "You already did that. I'm just cleaning up the mess." After I hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine. Not the cheap stuff I'd been buying for appearances, but a nice Pinot Grigio from my private reserve, and sat down to review the business records Janet had obtained through discovery. Wheeler and Associates was actually worth more than Marcus had led everyone to believe. Buried under the debt and creative accounting were some genuinely valuable assets, prime development rights, long-term contracts, and a reputation in the industry that could be salvaged with proper management. With some restructuring and competent leadership, it could actually be quite profitable. I made a note to schedule a meeting with Marcus's business partner. It was time to discuss the future of Wheeler and Associates, and whether there was room in that future for Wheeler himself. The meeting with David Chen, Marcus's business partner, took place the following week at a neutral location, the conference room at Janet's law firm. David arrived looking nervous and defeated, clutching a briefcase that probably contained every financial document related to their partnership. "Mrs. Wheeler," he said, standing when I entered the room, "I want you to know that I had no idea what Marcus was doing with the forged signatures and the—" I raised a hand to stop him. "David, I'm not here to assign blame or discuss the past. I'm here to talk about the future." We spent the next 2 hours going through the business books in detail. As I'd suspected, Wheeler and Associates had potential if it was properly managed and freed from Marcus's gambling debts and questionable decision-making. "Here's what I'm proposing," I said finally. "I'm willing to restructure the debt and maintain the business as a going concern, but there will be conditions." David nodded eagerly. "Whatever you need." "First, Marcus is out. Completely. He'll surrender all ownership interests and have no operational role going forward." "I understand." "Second, you'll need to bring in a qualified CFO to oversee all financial operations. Someone with forensic accounting experience who can ensure this kind of situation never happens again." "Absolutely." "Third, I want complete transparency. Monthly financial reports, quarterly audits, and approval authority over any transactions above $50,000. David was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. "Mrs. Wheeler, what you're describing sounds more like a takeover than a restructuring." "That's exactly what it is," I said calmly. I'm taking over the business that my husband used my credit to finance. The only question is whether you want to be part of the solution or part of the liquidation. He signed the partnership agreement that same afternoon. 3 days later, Marcus showed up at my apartment unannounced. I watched through the peephole as he stood in the hallway, looking older and more defeated than I'd ever seen him. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, wrinkled shirt, unshaven face, the desperate look of a man who'd finally realized he was trapped. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. "Hello, Marcus. Ruth, we need to talk. I thought we'd covered everything in our previous conversations."
Please.
Just 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside and let him enter. He walked into my small living room and looked around with barely concealed surprise. "This place is nice," he said, as if he'd expected to find me living in squalor. "It serves my needs." He turned to face me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes. Genuine fear. "Ruth, the FBI is building a case. My lawyer says they have video evidence of me forging your signature." "Do they?" "You know they do. You're the one who gave it to them." I didn't deny it. There was no point. I could go to prison, Ruth. Real prison. 5 to 10 years for bank fraud. Yes, you could. Is that what you want? To see me in prison? I considered the question seriously. Did I want to see Marcus behind bars? The man I'd once loved, despite everything he'd done? "What I want," I said finally, "is for you to take responsibility for what you've done. Not just to me, but to David, to your employees, to everyone whose lives you've damaged with your selfishness and lies." "I am taking responsibility. I'm here, aren't I? I'm trying to make things right. Are you? Or are you here because you finally realized that I'm not the helpless victim you thought I was?" His shoulders sagged. "When did you become so hard, Ruth?" "I became hard when I discovered that the man I'd loved and trusted for 38 years had been stealing from me and forging my signature. I became hard when I realized that everything I thought I knew about my marriage was a lie." I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot below. "But you know what, Marcus?
I'm grateful.
Your betrayal forced me to become someone stronger, smarter, more independent than I ever was when I was depending on you. In a way, you did me a favor." When I turned back, he was staring at me with something like recognition. "You planned all of this, didn't you? The divorce settlement, the loan purchase, everything. You knew exactly what you were doing from the beginning." "I knew what I needed to do to protect myself. Everything else was just responding to the choices you made." He was quiet for a long moment. "What happens now?" he asked finally. "That depends on you. You can fight this, hire more lawyers, drag out the criminal proceedings, force me to liquidate everything just to recover what you owe me. Or you can accept reality and work with me to minimize the damage." "What kind of deal are you offering?" "Full restitution of everything you stole from me, including the jewelry. A complete confession and apology, public, not private. And you disappear from my life permanently. And in return, I'll work with the prosecutor to recommend leniency on the criminal charges. You'll still face consequences, but hopefully not 5 to 10 years in federal prison." Marcus sank into my small armchair, his head in his hands. "How did it come to this, Ruth? How did we get here?" "You got here by making choices, Marcus. Every day for years, you chose to lie instead of tell the truth. You chose to steal instead of ask for help. You chose to risk everything we'd built together rather than face your problems honestly." I sat down across from him, this man who had once been the center of my world. "I got here by finally choosing to value myself enough to fight back." 6 months later, I stood in the corner office of what had formerly been Wheeler and Associates, now renamed Chun Wheeler Development, looking out